Welcome back, travelers. We're here with a new legendary lore on Innistrad. I know you guys are seeing all the spoilers. That's what's coming up. We got Innistrad. I'm Joe, and here your host. I have my partner, Professor Rio, Mr. Enrique Perez himself.
You got all three names wrong. You got my alias, you got my first name, and you got my last name. You couldn't even get, you know what? Like Joe said, welcome. This is one of our most ambitious legendary lores yet, because the plan is to go from the start of Innistrad's history that we know of and go all the way into Midnight Hunt and then eventually Crimson Vow. And we're going to get
married. It's so sad.
We're expecting Soren to get married. And as you would expect, today's episode starts off with Soren Markov, the lowly human Soren Markov.
Him to get married. If you see in that artwork, he's either getting married or he's starring in a romance novel.
I mean, he could, why not both? Thousands of years ago,
Doesn't have
it
a
was
good ending.
basically a lot of humans on Innistrad and some demons, maybe a few devils. It's unclear if necromancy was really going around, so we don't know if there were zombies yet. We don't really know about how the curse of werewolfism, lycanthropy, I guess best way to put it, started, so we don't really know that yet. Story-wise, we'll get to it. But we do know the exact moment that vampires came into existence on Innistrad. Basically, you had Edgar Markov. He was an alchemist, so he'd worked with like chemicals, and he worked with like trying to get like make gold, the philosopher's stone, the whole deal of what alchemy is about, right?
Yeah.
The law of exchange, so equivalent exchange. So basically, there's a famine, and they lived in Stensia, which is like the red-black region of Innistrad. Everybody's dying from starvation.
Oh no.
Yes, and so he's like, you know what? I need to do something. And he starts going through all these experiments, and he gets into more and more dark stuff, and nothing's working. And then this demon shows up, and his name is Gengar. So Gengar shows up, and he's like, hey, Edgar, buddy, old pal, I have a thing that you've never seen before. It's called sangromancy. He's like, oh, that sounds interesting. What does that mean? Basically, it's magic with blood. And he's like, oh, sangro, I understand now. Yeah, that makes sense.
Sangro.
So basically, Edgar does this dark ritual, a blood ritual, and it makes him basically functionally immortal, but requires him, of course, to live on blood.
Vampirism.
And when that happens, he's like, hey, this is great. I love this. I know exactly who I'm going to show this to. And he's like, hey, boy, his grandson, his only like member of his lineage, Soren, me boy, me Bob, get over here. And so he pulls Soren in, and he forces him to become a vampire. And it's when he forces his grandson to become a vampire that Soren's spark ignites. From that point, we then have the other families of vampires that we're going to talk about now.
Okay, wait. So Soren gets introduced to vampirism by his grandpa, and just like, you're a vampire now. Peace.
I'm a what? But yeah, he's forced to become a vampire.
And then he just leaves.
Yeah, from I guess you could say from the exceptional amount of trauma that is induced from your grandfather forcibly turning you into a semi-undead creature.
Are we going to get to Soren's cool sword in this one?
His Sorden, if you will.
No, I would never do that. That's something a goon would do.
So after Edgar became the first, I guess you could say, head vampire, you had this sudden like flood of people like, hey, I want to be a vampire too. And so you had a variety, you had basically 4 families that arose from these things. The first one that we'll talk about is the Volderin Clan. And the whole idea behind them, you have Olivia Volderin. She's the current leader of the Volderin bloodline. She's the progenitor of them. She was the one, she was the first Volderin. And from her, all the other ones were sired, I think is the best way to describe it.
Nice.
So basically, the whole idea was that she was a very strange, hermetic, beautiful, and antisocial woman. And she lived basically like a hermit out in the woods. And she would go into like manor homes, and she would just like kind of live there in those giant mansions away from everybody else, right? And then she discovered the magic of being a bloodsucker and was like, hey, this is exactly what I want to do with my life. And so she did. And that's exactly what she did. She just has a ton of manors and fortresses that she built, basically, as a result. And it was also that she could throw as many parties as she wanted to and do basically just be the super eccentric kind of, I guess, bon vivant is the term.
So she did a complete 180, just like, I'm homeless and antisocial. I got all the houses and all the people.
Yeah, pretty much. The Volderin Clan is probably one of the largest ones, and they specialize in transformation. So the main three things they prefer to like transform into are bats, cats, and rats.
The trifecta.
Yes, because they all rhyme, and apparently that's enough to do it.
Yep.
A fun thing is there's an event called the Court of the Vampire King or Queen. And the idea is that it's a 3-day holiday that Olivia invented, right? So she goes out, she finds a human, a normal human, right? And she takes them to the estate. And the whole time they're given the best food and drink, and they're given like these huge theaters, and the vampires will listen to literally anything the human says, right?
I don't like where this is going.
The entire time, because everybody's completely aware of it, the human is desperately pleading to be let go. And that is the only thing that the vampires are not allowed to accept. With the most depraved request, they will listen to. But they will not let the person go. That is the only thing they cannot do. At the end of the 3 days, the king or queen is then killed, and everyone drinks the blood together.
Yep.
Another one of the main vampire bloodlines are the Falcon Wrath, and you've seen their aristocrats and a variety of other things.
And they're also infinite combo decks.
Yeah, exactly. What's interesting about the Falcon Wrath is that their original progenitor, who is now dead. So Olivia.
So Anya's not the original.
No, and we'll talk about her a bit as well.
Okay.
But as far as this thing goes, the original one was a falconer, and his whole deal was that he had falcons. And that's what they're called, the Falcon Wrath. And they also...
Like, the Falcon's attacking. It's the Falcon's Wrath. I know what our name is.
And what's interesting is that they are the ones that are most likely to have wings.
I like that.
So, like, you'll the Falcon Wrath...
That's true.
Yeah, the Falcon Wrath
Not a lot of vampires on Innistrad have flying, but the ones that do, you'll notice they're Falcon Wrath.
They tend to be Falcon Wrath. And they have these massive, like, bat wings. Like, the Falcon Wrath Marauders has these white wings. It looks really cool. Like, it contrasts really well with the red armor they wear. But what's really important about the Falcon Wrath is that not only can they fly, they're also basically like the more red side of things. They're extremely brazen, extremely bold. I haven't talked about what happens later on in the history. This is just basically the beginnings of each of these clans. So what happens later on is kind of, we're going to get into it. But as far as like these things go, you have Angie Falcon Wrath, or Anye. I don't know how it would be pronounced.
Isn't it Anya?
Anya, that's how you would pronounce it?
That's how I saw somebody playing Commander pronounce it. I think it's Anya. I know it's the Y sound for the J at the very least.
Yeah. So the idea is that she is basically just the most messed up vampire. By the Falcon Wrath people, who we've already described, she is considered to be relentless, ruthless, and cruel. That's like what she's supposed to be. Like, that's how they view Anya. She's that kind of hardcore.
You're insane. That's what they call me.
You got it. Stromkirk, which is the last of the groups, we haven't seen a scion or a progenitor for the Stromkirk group.
I actually forgot about them because we don't have a legendary creature from them.
Well, their whole deal is illusion magic. That's why you have something like the Stromkirk Noble who can just walk among the humans without any kind of problems. They literally do not notice him. Their progenitor is Runo Stromkirk, but we haven't seen anything about him. All we know is that he was a high priest. He worshipped a pre-Abyssinian god of the sea and storms. And it's because of this that they still live in Nephalia, which is the coastal town. And they also are the ones that tend to have the ability to turn into mist. There's a lot of things that
blue.
That's the thing. There's a lot of things about the Stromkirk line that lean blue. There's a black vampire that becomes a blue mist in the Innistrad sets. One of the sets has one that can turn into a mist, an unblockable mist. Nephalia was a coastal place, right? And the vampires have been systematically destroying the trees in the area so that no one would be able to create stakes to kill them. Which is something that none of the other ones did. And what he did is he worked specifically to turn all the people that were around him, the humans, instead of turning them into vampires, he turned them into artisans. He turned them into craftsmen so that they could make their entire life and world based around wood. And so by doing that, he discouraged them from creating stakes from the same wood. Which is a great little detail, I think, about these characters.
It definitely shows the blue in the Stromkirk.
Yes. And of course, again, all vampires in this set are red-black. In all the Innistrad sets, they're always got red-black. That's their area. But what we're going to talk about now is interesting. When it comes to the Stromkirk, you pretty much get a really good idea of, oh, these people are just really smart and they know what they're doing at all times. They even have humans who they consider to have delicious blood, kept, pampered, in bondage. Like they're pampered in incarceration, I think a better way to put it. They have very luxurious prisons where they keep their livestock of humans just so they can continuously bleed them and have like food off of them. It's the most humane method for a vampire to exist in the society.
I mean, that sounds kind of delightful to just walk in, just like, hey, my captor, what's for food today? What would you like for food? Whatever I want. Yep. By the way, it's time to cut open your arm for today. Okay.
You.
Oh, this is delicious.
Exquisite. But yeah, and the last thing that the Stromkirk to mention about the Stromkirk is that if they don't like a vampire going on a frenzy, because obviously they're very high decorum, when a vampire goes on a frenzy, that results in people being like, hey, we need to go take care of these vampires. And they don't like that because they don't want to get staked. So if a vampire goes into a frenzy, they will personally go and take care of that vampire and kill them.
Nice.
Especially if it's from a different bloodline, because it's not their deal. It's not what they do. But all that said, I may have made a little fib. There is one blue vampire, Yeleva Nephalia's Scourge. Nephalia, of course, being where the
Nephalia's in Innistrad. We've been talking about that.
That is correct. So here's the deal about her.
Basically, the Team Aqua hideout. Because they destroy the land and they live by the sea.
She is a direct descendant of Runo Stromkirk.
Serve a giant whale.
But she completely severed all bloodline. Like all of her ties with the bloodline she just got rid of. Because she didn't like the way they handle things, and she just wants to enjoy preying on her victims' minds and devouring their blood, playing little games of cat and mouse. But she doesn't just attack people, she focuses on wizards so that she can siphon their spells from them for herself.
Her card is basically the best written card ever then.
Yes, it makes perfect sense. And the Church of Avacyn actually has, or had, a price on her head. And monster hunters actively would go after her, which she enjoyed because then she could steal their special monster hunter spells from her.
I usually go after Rathians and Rathalos as a monster hunter.
Fair. What's important here is that these are the 4 vampire families. We're going to talk a little bit more about Soren in the next episode. This is just basically to get you an idea of this is the kind of world of Innistrad that you're in.
That was awesome. Thank you guys so much for watching. Leave a like if you like the video and subscribe and let us know in the comments what kind of vampire you would be. Which of these families would you join? If you wouldn't join the family, that's fine. The other people in the comments will hunt you down and suck your blood. Bye, guys.
Joe, you're like the king.
Of what? Oh.
Of the-